Welcome to our BioLongevity Doc podcast. What is this podcast all about? My guests and I will discuss holistic aspects of dental health, but also overall health and related lifestyle, longevity, what used to be called anti-aging or better aging, but nowadays we say longevity, whatever that means. Ultimately, it's about aging autonomously, responsibly and self-determined, staying fit and vital to experience maximum joy in life. However, it's also about prosperity. I don't mean that in a primarily monetary sense, like everyone swimming in money. If someone wants that, they're welcome to it. But it's about well-being, about everyone doing well, and ultimately certain material aspects do play a role in that. And everyone has to define that for themselves. So it's about overall health with a focus on holistic dental health, biological dentistry being the keyword. And it's about lifestyle, and it's about sharing knowledge and, raising awareness about certain specific connections. My personal focus is, of course, my professional background as a long-experienced biological dentist, actually more from a high-tech, prevention-oriented practice background with quite a lot of clinical experience over 30 years with tens of thousands of treated and rehabilitated patients. And similar patterns actually keep emerging over the decades. And I'd just like to share a bit of that experience with you because not everything is as it's written in textbooks, and certainly not the way it's often taught at universities, although that's not always wrong, of course. A lot of it is correct, but it's far from sufficient, I would just say. And of course, it goes far beyond actual dentistry. It's basically just one playing field, an important sub-area of all these mentioned aspects because everything is connected. It's always about the complex networking, and that's how we'll move from one topic to another. And as a current starting point, I'd like to use my latest book. It's called The Silent Root Cause. And as the name suggests, it's about silent causes or root causes, so to speak. And of course, it's meant to have multiple layers of meaning. It's about the silent causes of dental diseases, for example. But the word silent is also in there. It's primarily about the hidden, not loud, meaning not painful, perhaps not so well known, perhaps often underrated and unknown dangers and the resulting consequences, initially typically for dental and oral health. And this is the crucial point, naturally above all resulting from that for overall health as well. And there are an incredible number of interesting and for many of you probably unknown connections. And it's simply about sharing knowledge and insights here so that everyone, depending on where they stand in terms of knowledge, can not only learn something new, but of course also autonomously influence their own health through this insight. Health begins in the mouth. Of course, dental health and oral health aren't everything. There are other very essential health aspects as well, for example, gut health, the microbiome, and so on and so forth. Physical health, healthy joints, healthy muscles, a healthy brain, of course, as the central control center in the truest sense of the word. But in fact, the oral cavity is connected to all sorts of systems in an extremely diverse and extremely powerful way, meaning with a high impact factor, not just through nervous systems, but also through movement and support systems, through hormone systems, through the vascular systems. Of course, meaning, for example, the influence of bacteria from the oral cavity, from the gum pockets which enter the bloodstream and naturally get everywhere, not just into every organ, but also into the brain ultimately, and could potentially cause multiple types of damage there. And it's also about new research findings, but also about ancient wisdom and many different aspects. And so we can work our way through every little detail here, episode by episode, but we must never forget the big picture in the process. So lifestyle is an enormously important thing, and of course linked to that is one's own nutrition, the quality, the ingredients, the timing of nutrition and other lifestyle factors. Exercise, hygiene, oral hygiene, and also emotional and mental aspects play a very, very large role, as well as the whole attitude towards life and life circumstances. Environmental factors are extremely important, and these won't be neglected here either. It's not at all about being preachy and spreading a kind of school of prohibitions here. Everyone is, of course, autonomous, responsible for themselves, and enjoyment is certainly also something very, very beautiful. It's simply about learning which balance might be more conducive to health and which imbalance might be more conducive to disease. But everyone should be able to shape their own destiny. The keyword epigenetics is crucial because ultimately we know from modern epigenetic research that we ourselves, through epigenetic factors, actually have control over most things. Of course, there are genetic factors that we all essentially have to accept as fate. We can't escape those, but with epigenetics, and that's the good news, we actually have most of it under our own control in a way. And for anyone who, like me, is excited by the idea of longevity or healthy longevity, it's actually a personal goal of mine to stay healthy and fit for as long as possible while enjoying life to the fullest. And longevity is always about thinking in terms of decades too. That does not mean being anti-pleasure or having a culture of prohibition. It essentially means being more conscious and aware. Managing things so that in the long run, you basically optimize environmental factors in order to avoid major mistakes as much as possible. Which factors are more positive and which are more negative, so that you can choose for yourself and pursue your own goals to the maximum. Of course, it's also about capability or performance, as it's so nicely called these days. And I don't just mean that in an athletic sense, I also mean it more mentally, or even in terms of motivation in general. One's own creative power, creativity, and vitality. It's also a bit about athletic performance, because one thing is clear: if you rest, you rust. And experience already shows that staying fit, and I don't mean extreme competitive sports, but staying personally fit keeps someone in a way in the race or in the game. And that inevitably makes you healthier for longer, in a certain sense. There are a huge number of studies on that, including on cardiovascular adaptability and susceptibility. And there again, it's the cumulative effect that ultimately matters. And when we talk about real longevity, it's actually always at least a triathlon, at least a marathon. It's not just about short sprints or brief hypes that quickly pass, but rather about the ongoing and intentional process of long-term optimization of your lifestyle. This means paying attention to the habits you form and the choices you make each day, as well as the various factors that influence all of these effects over time. And it's about the knowledge of what can be done in the most optimal way, efficiently and effectively. Exploring knowledge topics like AI, for example, because AI is neither a curse nor a blessing, but basically just a new world that, if you're socialized in a somewhat modern world or environment, you really can't avoid these topics. And depending on your personal focus, it naturally has a more important or acute meaning or a less significant or subordinate one. But the goal of this podcast is also to, highlight current developments and to learn more about them. We will also make sure that with appropriate, let's say, technical contributions, expert articles, we might bring in one or two aha moments for many of you. And lifelong learning is also a very important aspect regarding one's own longevity, because that also keeps you, much like your own fitness or athleticism, naturally in life, in the game. And you also have to be challenged, because otherwise you literally rust away mentally and physically. So there will certainly be many exciting topics. There will also be topics from the latest scientific longevity research, which gets very much into molecular biology or epigenetics. That might not interest everyone in super great detail. But we'll see, it will always be a balance between individual aspects of the current science base, and it will also be a lot about aspects back to the roots, as they say. So good old proven knowledge that has stood the test of time over generations will also be considered. And if you look closely, it's the case that much in the modern science space, the latest scientific detailed research carried out by experts in the field actually confirms the reasons why one thing or another, something that has been recognized and accepted for generations, truly works as it does. We just know now exactly why it works in a certain aspect, be it ice bathing or whatever else. That was already known in the past many decades and generations ago, or sauna and sports and exercise and various types of gymnastics, which goes back to the Greeks, or yoga, Ayurvedic, Indian. Nowadays, in modern sports science or in modern longevity research, biomolecular research, genetic research, we know what might work and how in minute detail, but the big picture as a whole must, of course, never be ignored. Otherwise, you end up measuring yourself to death and knowing all sorts of tiny details, but forget to just go into the woods or listen to beautiful music, for example. So we're trying to achieve an interesting mix, and we'll soon begin with the first content-focused episode. And sorry for speaking from my very own perspective there. We will start with oral and dental health from a holistic perspective, because from there we can already get very deep into other areas. We'll be bringing up the topic of nutrition and the connections, and of course supplementation, or how you can tune things, because there are so many interesting, really very effective things. And if you have any comments or requests regarding content, then please let us know so that we can respond to them if necessary. So enjoy listening to or watching the podcast, depending on where you're watching the video or listening to the audio. Until next time. I almost forgot the most important thing. We also have the Health and Wealth Privacy Framework, the Biolongevity Framework. My wife, Dr. Barbara Bauder, has a super interesting podcast and a super interesting channel, which is more about these health, wealth, and privacy topics, the biolongevity framework, as we call it. And there will be a very close cooperation in terms of content. And I'd just like to encourage you to take a look at the corresponding posts.